Bob said I did well. He don't look too happy. Fuck it, I don't care. Like, I'm your only last star available, and that's it. So you just gotta deal with it. You know what I mean? You gotta deal with it.
Oh, so Teofimo talking that talk. Takeover. Teofimo defeats Steve Claggett. He says to Bob Arum, he said I did good, but he ain't look so happy. But it, I'm the only star you got left, so you gotta deal with me. He said deal with me or deal with me. Those are your choices. Let's go. Listen, I don't know what is going on with Teofimo Lopez, but over the last several years, it seems like he has almost a weird relationship with Top Rank, where he's battled Top Rank and Top Rank representatives, things of that sort. And now he just beat Steve Claggett in Miami. He says, Bob said I did well, but he don't look so happy. You guys heard the audio at the beginning. He said he don't look so happy, but it, you got to deal with me. I'm the last star. So Teofimo believes he's the last star, over Shakur and Keyshawn and Jared Anderson, all these other names. And I want to know what you guys think in the comment section. Top Rank has Lomachenko. They got future stars like Abdullah Mason. But truthfully, I don't even know where Teofimo's star power is at the current moment. Like, I don't doubt that if Teofimo Lopez gets the right dance partner, like a Ryan Garcia, a Devin Haney, a Gervonta Davis, he called out Pitbull Cruz. If he gets another high-profile name, then I think he can make for a big fight. But fighting guys like Steve Claggett, that's not gonna cut it. And because I didn't do a separate video, and I'm not, so I'm gonna give you guys my thoughts from the Steve Claggett fight. And I gotta keep it real with y'all. I gotta keep it a buck like the dollar store. I wasn't really impressed with Teofimo Lopez. And did he win every single round? Yes. But still, I wasn't really impressed with what I saw. In fact, I was more impressed with Steve Claggett. Now, let me explain, because I know some of y'all try to jump the gun and, what do you mean, ego? So let me explain. The reason why is because in these fights, in these assessments, I look at all the variables, the perception, who this fighter is supposed to be versus who this fighter is supposed to be. And Steve Claggett entered the fight with 7 losses. Nobody's ever heard of him. And although he didn't win the rounds, he was still pushing the fight and he was making it kind of uncomfortable. He never got dropped in the fight. And I really believe this. Listen up carefully. I think Teofimo Lopez lost his last fight to Jermaine Ortiz. When they fought in real time, I said the same thing. That's my honest opinion. He lost that fight. I think Jermaine Ortiz boxed very nicely. I don't know what the ESPN commentators, they're insanely biased. I don't know what they were talking about. People were acting like it was the most boring thing. I actually thought Jermaine Ortiz had a great game plan and boxed sharply. So I don't know what you guys are looking for. I'm not going to say it was a Gotti Ward type of fight, but not every fight is going to be that. And the name of the game is win. It don't matter if sometimes it's going to be you outbox a guy. Sometimes if you're a fighter like Gervonta Davis, maybe you get the knockout, but it's going to be what it's going to be. So in that fight, Teofimo lost, in my opinion. And I think Teofimo lost to Sandor Martin. So the reason why I wasn't really impressed with Teofimo, and I'm giving credit to Steve Claggett, is because Teofimo, the perception was that he lost. And I know it wasn't just myself. People think that he lost that last fight with Jermaine Ortiz, who utilized the ring, created space, ring generalship. He was boxing more. He wasn't necessarily sitting down on all of his shots. He was trying to box and frustrate Teofimo and he succeeded in doing that. So Teofimo was given this Steve Claggett guy who had 7 losses. They put him in a place like Miami because Steve Claggett, if you watch his style, like I hadn't really seen too much from him, but if you watch his style, it's very obvious why the top-ranked matchmakers gave Teofimo Lopez on the heels of Jermaine Ortiz, a guy like Steve Claggett, because literally he was the polar opposite of how Jermaine Ortiz boxed and what gave Teofimo all the problems in the world, and why I'm saying that I think Teofimo lost that fight. So when Teofimo's in there with crafty boxers, I don't know if Jermaine Ortiz studied the Sandor Martin fight. He seems to be befuddled and not know what to do, you know, when a person is just durable and just clever boxing, even George Kambosos fight. So I think in all of those fights, Kambosos and Sandor Martin and Jermaine Ortiz, there are some commonalities. So what top-ranked matchmakers did is they put him in with somebody who's not crafty like Sandor Martin, is not utilizing and has the size and the power and the frame and the boxing ability of Jermaine Ortiz. Literally the polar opposite, you know? You know how you have good and evil, chocolate, vanilla. They literally gave Teofimo the person that he was supposed to really have a showcase fight with. He wasn't. It's not like this guy you have to search for. It's not like a guy who takes a step back. This guy was just like coming forward, minimal defense, not jabbing his way in. He threw a lot of punches, has heart, durable, has losses, only had been stopped once. And Teofimo, he didn't do enough for me not to win the fight, because I told you he won every round, but he didn't do enough to impress. Not once did he really have Steve Claggett almost out of there. You know, I think round 8, somewhere around there, he had maybe one of his best rounds. He was sending some shots to Steve Claggett, and it looked like he was ringing his bell, getting his attention. But credit to Steve Claggett, bit down on his gum shield and, you know, had the gumption to just keep coming forward, and a great poker face. So I really wasn't impressed with what I seen from Teofimo, because when I look at Steve Claggett, and I'm giving him his respect for what he did, he was overmatched. He was brought in as somebody who was supposed to be a showcase fight, and he made the most of it. And it's hard to explain, but even when a guy loses every round, sometimes a fight can still be competitive, because Steve Claggett had a lot of pressure that he was applying, and he was making Teofimo throw a lot of punches and move a lot and stuff. So he was still imposing his will. And it really made me wonder about Teofimo. This just really wasn't a fight and a style that blended well, and I don't think it did what it was intended to do, which was to be a quote-unquote cupcake to wash out and rinse out the aftertaste of the Jermaine Ortiz fight and how he performed there. I think Top Rank literally spoon-fed him a tailor-made style for Teofimo that he was supposed to obliterate, and he didn't really obliterate. He moved and won, pot-shotted, counterpunched, you know, never even dropped the guy. So I'm giving more props to Steve Claggett because he had everything against him. He was the B-side. He had 7 losses. It was his fight to lose. And with not knowing much of his pedigree, me personally, I at least respect his approach. Like he was a tough dude. Teofimo, that's part of it. He always says all this takeover stuff. He literally just said that he's the best fighter in the world. This fight wasn't even really promoted well, in my opinion. It kind of just crept up. They had Teofimo fighting on the same night as Bam Rodriguez and Estrada in Arizona, which to me, that fight makes a lot of sense. Putting a fight like Estrada Rodriguez, Bam Rodriguez in Arizona. And you also had the UFC with Potan. So it just, I think Teofimo, he actually put on the worst performance out of the main event, even though he won every round. The ESPN commentary was insanely biased, and they was like riding him and glazing him, but I wasn't impressed. Bam Rodriguez impressed me. Alex Pereira, he impressed me like he's been impressing me. Teofimo, he got the victory, but it just didn't look copacetic to me. In terms of, and again, this is all things considered, Teofimo talks a lot. His dad talks a lot. They're doing stuff like calling out guys like Terence Crawford. I don't want to hear Teofimo call out Terence Crawford anymore, because imagine Terence Crawford versus Steve Claggett at 140 when Crawford was there or when he was undisputed there. I mean, a guy like that is either getting stopped, which I would bet that Crawford would stop Steve Claggett, or it would be he's getting stopped, put it that way. At the very least, bare bones minimum, Steve Claggett would get dropped probably several times, just depending on how much he could take and how tough that he is. But Crawford, there's no way that Crawford would look similar to how Teofimo looked versus Claggett. So it really made me consider a lot with Teofimo. For example, you look at Teofimo, you look at his face post-fight, his face was pretty marked up. He had a lot of reddening, and ESPN was trying to cop a plea and explain away why, oh, his face just marks up. No, your face don't just mark up unless you're getting hit. So Teofimo, I don't know. I just feel like I don't think we've seen the same Teofimo fully since the Kambosos loss. Before that, when he was on the Heisman nights and Fortnite dancing and emoting on people and backflipping, that Teofimo was a lot more believable. I don't know how much it has to do with him losing to Kambosos. I don't know if it's the transition at 135 to 140, which we have seen guys like that. When they move up in weight, they don't look like the same killers. Because here's the thing, Teofimo, I think his bag is more athleticism. He's an athletic fighter. He's not the most fundamentally sound with the best setups and the best traps and, you know, just the most technique. I think he has some power, respectable power at 140, and he's an athletic guy, right? So that's what I'm seeing, because I don't know. You look at, like, let's say Gervonta Davis. From what I've seen, Gervonta Davis would beat Teofimo. I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's the best fight of the Four Horsemen. I don't see it. Like, I would watch it, yeah, put it on. But I don't see Teofimo beating Tank Davis. Imagine Tank Davis fighting Steve Claggett. What do you think would happen, even at 140? Like, honestly, some dude with 7 losses and no defense, no jab, just keep walking forward. Tank already fought Mario Barrios, who is bigger than Claggett. And in my opinion, he's better than Claggett, and he's more experienced, right? And Tank dropped him probably like 3 times and ended up stopping him, something Ugas couldn't do, something that Maidana's brother couldn't do, and something that Keith One-Time Thurman, at one point, a 2-belt holder in a higher division, those fights that I just named at welterweight, these welterweights can't stop Mario Barrios to this point, but Tank is stopping him at 140. So Tank's one fight at 140 was highly impressive, and it's aged very well because Barrios is doing well for himself and he's a champion in the new division. Steve Claggett is like a poor man's great value equate Mario Barrios. He's not on even the Barrios level to me, and Teofimo's going 12 with him and backing up a lot. Face looks kind of tattered at the end of the fight and swollen. I just wasn't impressed. They're talking about Teo moving up to fight Brian Norman at 147. I think that's a good fight. Brian Norman is a big puncher. He's a strong welterweight. He doesn't have the experience of a Crawford, so I think that's more winnable for both guys. But fights with Jerron Boots Ennis and Teofimo, or Crawford or Tank, I think Teo got to leave that alone. He's talking about he's the last star, but I don't know. We'll see what his viewership is. I wasn't really impressed. I'm just being real. You guys can listen to me, or you can listen to the ESPN commentary. And it's not like something like Teofimo did something insanely wrong or absurd. He won the rounds for sure. But against a guy with 7 losses, who's been stopped before, who just wasn't supposed to be on your level, I think you're supposed to do a bit more if you're as good as Teofimo claims to be. He literally just said he's the best fighter in the world. He doesn't care about fame, but he's the best guy in boxing. You know, that performance with Clagett, it wasn't strong enough to show me that. You got a guy like Gervonta Davis who had legal problems. He sat down and was locked up for a period of time, took the rest of the year off, came back off of like a 14-month layoff, fought a rated, like a top 5 rated lightweight in Frank Martin, and he literally dominated, in my opinion. Frank Martin did but it was more so because of Tank wasn't opening up. As soon as Tank started to open up, he started to punish Frank Martin, and it culminated in a spicy, viral knockout. And we had never seen Frank Martin so much as dropped, let alone knocked out like that. So to me, wins like that are more impressive than a guy who's overmatched in like a top-ranked special with 7 losses. That gave me more respect for Steve Claggett and let me know a little bit more about his mentality, since I didn't know much about it, than it did a champion like Teofimo. It just didn't really, this matchup didn't really do much for him, in my opinion.